9 experienced hikers entered the Ural Mountains in the winter of 1959. They were young, strong, and highly trained for extreme conditions. But something happened during the night. Something so terrifying that they cut their way out of their tent. They ran into the freezing darkness. Some of them were barefoot. Weeks later, their bodies were found scattered across the mountain, and the injuries they suffered made absolutely no sense. More than 60 years later, investigators still cannot explain what really happened on that mountain. This is the mystery of Dyatlov Pass. In January of 1959, a group of university students set out on a winter expedition in the Soviet Union. Their destination was a remote area of the Ural Mountains. The leader of the group was a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. He was experienced in extreme winter hiking, and every member of the group had advanced training. For them, this was supposed to be a difficult adventure, but nothing unusual. There were originally 10 hikers in the group. However, one of them became sick early in the journey. He decided to turn back. That decision would later save his life. The remaining 9 hikers continued deeper into the mountains. Their goal was to reach a remote peak known as a Torten. The journey was long and exhausting. They carried heavy equipment. They moved through deep snow, and the temperatures were brutally cold. But according to their diaries and photographs, the group was in good spirits. They joked with each other. They took pictures. They documented the expedition step by step. Everything seemed normal until the night of February 1st. That evening, the hikers set up their tent on the side of a mountain. It was not an ideal place to camp. The slope was exposed to strong winds, and the temperature was far below freezing. Still, the group decided to stay there for the night. They ate dinner. They wrote in their journals, and eventually, they went to sleep. But sometime during the night, something went terribly wrong. Because what rescuers later discovered at that campsite would become one of the strangest mysteries in modern history. When the hikers failed to return from the expedition, their families became worried. Days passed, then weeks. Eventually, a large search operation was organized. Rescue teams began scanning the mountains. They expected to find a lost group of hikers. Maybe an avalanche, maybe a simple accident. But when the search team finally found the campsite, the scene made no sense. The tent was still standing, but it had been cut open from the inside. Not the outside, from the inside. It looked as if the hikers had desperately tried to escape, and they did not even use the entrance. Footprints led away from the tent. The rescuers followed them. The tracks showed something strange. The hikers had left calmly. Not running, but they were barefoot. Some of them were wearing only socks. Others had almost no clothing at all. And the temperature that night was close to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The footprints led down the mountain, toward a forest about 1 mile away. Under a large cedar tree, the rescuers found the first 2 bodies. They were lying near the remains of a small fire. Both of them were barefoot and dressed in very little clothing. It looked like they had tried to survive the freezing cold. But the mystery was only beginning, because the remaining hikers were still missing. And what investigators would discover next made the case even more disturbing. Over the next few months, the remaining bodies were discovered. They were scattered across the mountain. 3 of them were found between the cedar tree and the tent. It looked as if they had tried to return to the campsite, but they never made it. The last 4 hikers were discovered weeks later, buried under deep snow in a nearby ravine, and their injuries shocked the investigators. One hiker had severe skull fractures. Another had crushed ribs. The force of the injuries was so strong that investigators compared it to a car crash. But there were no signs of external trauma. No deep wounds, no blood, just devastating internal damage. One of the victims was also missing her tongue and part of her face. Even stranger, some of their clothes showed traces of radiation. For decades, people have tried to explain what happened that night. Some believe it was a rare avalanche. Others think the hikers may have been exposed to secret military experiments. There are also theories involving strange atmospheric phenomena, and even something unknown. But none of these explanations answer every question. Why did the hikers cut their way out of the tent? Why did they run into the freezing night with almost no clothing? And what caused the terrifying injuries found on some of the bodies? More than 60 years later, the mystery of Dyatlov Pass remains unsolved. And the question still lingers. What really happened on that mountain that night?